The xenoarchaeologist's hands trembled as she held the crystallized bone fragment under the quantum scanner, watching the helical structures materialize in the holographic display above her workstation. Dr. Sarah Chen had excavated thousands of samples from pre-contact burial sites across 7 worlds, but nothing had prepared her for this. The DNA signature, glowing before her eyes, matched her own genetic code with 99.7% accuracy. Impossible. The sample had been carbon dated to 50,000 years before humanity ever left Earth, extracted from sediment layers on Kepler 442b, a planet humans had only reached 3 years ago. Her breath caught. The laboratory's sterile air suddenly felt too thin. She ran the analysis again, then a third time, each result identical. Someone with her exact genetic markers had died and been buried on an alien world millennia before her species developed written language. Dr. Chen, her assistant's voice crackled through the comm. The matriarch's transport just entered orbit. She's requesting immediate audience. Sarah's stomach dropped. The Valkyrie matriarch never made unscheduled visits to human research stations. The insectoid species had welcomed humanity into the galactic community with surprising warmth, sharing technology and star charts, guiding them past the mistakes that had destroyed lesser civilizations. But they maintained strict protocols. The matriarch ruled 17 worlds with absolute authority, her compound eyes seeing in spectrums humans couldn't imagine, her mind processing information at speeds that made quantum computers seem sluggish. Tell her I'll prepare the... She's already docking. Bay 3. She came alone. Alone. That violated every security measure the Valkyrie had established over 8,000 years of interstellar politics. Sarah grabbed the bone fragment, sealing it in a containment cylinder, and ran. The corridors blurred past, her footsteps echoing against titanium walls. Through the viewport windows, Kepler 442b's twin moons cast violet light across the excavation fields where her team had been working for 18 months, slowly uncovering the remnants of a civilization that predated anything in the galactic archives. The airlock hissed open as she reached Bay 3. The matriarch stood motionless in the center of the docking platform, her chitinous exoskeleton gleaming like polished obsidian, her forearms folded in a configuration Sarah had never seen before. The royal guard who normally accompanied her was absent. The silence stretched, broken only by the station's ventilation systems humming through recycled air. "You found her," the matriarch said, her mandibles clicking softly, translating into perfect English through the neural interface. Not a question, a statement of fact. Sarah's grip tightened on the containment cylinder. "Your Majesty, I don't understand. The sample is 50,000 years old. My DNA shouldn't be..." "Show me!" The command carried weight that made Sarah's knees weak. She approached slowly, extending the cylinder. The matriarch's primary arms remained folded, but her secondary set reached out with surprising gentleness, taking the sample. Those compound eyes studied it for exactly 3 seconds before lifting to meet Sarah's gaze. "My grandmother told me you would come," the matriarch said. "Not you specifically, but one of your line. She made me promise that when this day arrived, I would tell the truth humanity has forgotten." "What truth? That you have been here before?" The words hung in the recycled air like a death sentence. Sarah felt the station's artificial gravity shift beneath her feet, though she knew it remained constant. "That's impossible. Humans evolved on Earth. We have the fossil record, the genetic evidence, You evolved on Earth the second time?" The matriarch moved past her toward the viewport, her movements fluid despite her massive frame. "The first time you reached the stars 57,000 years ago. You built an empire that spanned 43 worlds. You were glorious and terrible and brilliant." She paused, her reflection ghostly in the reinforced glass. "And then you destroyed yourself so completely that even your homeworld forgot you existed." Sarah's mind reeled. Every scientific principle she'd built her career on was crumbling. If that were true, there would be evidence, structures, technology, something in the archaeological record. There is. The matriarch turned, and Sarah saw something in those alien eyes she'd never expected to see. Sadness. Ancient and profound. "You're standing in it." This entire excavation site. The buried cities on Proxima Centauri B. The megalithic structures on Tau Ceti E that your governments claimed were natural formations, the genetic markers in 17 different species across the galactic arm that share sequences with human DNA. We've been hiding it from you, waiting until you were ready. Ready for what? To remember why you fell. A child's laughter echoed through the docking bay. Sarah spun, her heart hammering. A small figure stood in the secondary airlock, no more than 5 years old, wearing a pressure suit 3 sizes too large. Human. Female. Dark eyes that held impossible age. "Hello, Dr. Chen," the child said, her voice carrying harmonics that made Sarah's bones vibrate. "I've been waiting a very long time to meet you again." The matriarch's wings, normally folded tight against her carapace, spread slightly, a gesture of reverence Sarah had only seen during the most sacred ceremonies. "This," she said quietly, "is why I came alone, why I violated every protocol. Because she asked me to. And because 60,000 years ago, she saved my species from extinction. We owe her everything." Sarah stared at the impossible child, at the ancient queen who bowed to no one, at the bone fragment that carried her own genetic signature across an impossible gulf of time. Recognition. Memory. The weight of civilizations rising and falling like tides. "My name was different then," the child said, taking a step forward. Her 2 large boots scraped against the deck plating. "But you knew me. We were friends, until the day I made the choice that ended everything and saved nothing." The matriarch's mandibles clicked a complex pattern, grief in the Valkyrie language. "She's the last of the eternal ones, the humans who learned to transfer consciousness across cloned bodies, who thought they could cheat death itself. She has lived through your species' first rise, its catastrophic fall, and its slow rebirth into ignorance. And now she has to tell you why it happened."
"Why?"
Sarah whispered. The child's ancient eyes glistened. "'Cause it's happening again. The signs are identical, and this time, if we fail, there won't be a third chance. The universe doesn't give those." The containment cylinder slipped from Sarah's nerveless fingers, clattering against the deck but not breaking. Outside the viewport, Kepler 442b rotated slowly, its surface scarred with the remnants of cities humanity had built and destroyed before it ever learned to make fire. The weight of 50,000 years pressed against Sarah's chest, making it hard to breathe, harder to think. But in the child's eyes, in the matriarch's solemn silence, she saw the truth that would reshape everything humanity thought it knew about itself. The past wasn't dead. It had been waiting. And now it was demanding answers that Sarah wasn't sure she wanted to hear. The child smiled sadly. "Shall we begin? There's so much you need to remember, Dr. Chen. So much we need to prevent, and so little time before history repeats itself in ways that will make the last catastrophe look like mercy." Sarah's knees buckled, but she didn't fall. The matriarch caught her with surprising gentleness, those powerful arms supporting her weight while the child approached, one small hand extended across the impossible distance of epochs and extinction events. "Trust me," the child said. "One more time, like you did before, when I was trying to save the world and destroyed it instead." Sarah took the hand. The moment their skin touched, the station's lights went dark and memories that weren't hers flooded through her neurons like fire. The screaming started almost immediately, but it was coming from her own throat, and she couldn't make it stop. The memories crashed through Sarah's consciousness like solar flares, each one searing and specific. She saw herself, but not herself, standing in a laboratory that made this research station look like a cave painting. Technologies that bent space-time like origami surrounded her, and through floor-to-ceiling windows she watched 12 moons orbit in synchronized patterns around a world that no longer existed. Her hands worked controls that responded to thought alone, her younger face reflected in polished surfaces that hummed with contained power. Beside her stood the child, except she wasn't a child then. She was tall, luminous, her features shifting between faces as consciousness jumped between bodies like electricity arcing between conductors. Alara Ven. The name surfaced from the drowning flood of information. The first human to achieve immortality through consciousness transfer. The woman who promised to shepherd humanity into an age of eternal wisdom. The woman who triggered the cascade that killed 40 billion people. Sarah gasped as the matriarch's secondary arms pressed something cold against her temple, severing the connection. The vision stopped, but after images burned behind her eyes, she tasted copper and realized she'd bitten her tongue hard enough to draw blood. "Enough," the matriarch said firmly. "Too much too fast will fracture her mind. The human brain isn't designed for wholesale memory integration. She needs to understand the child," Alara said, but she stepped back, her small hand withdrawing. "The pattern is accelerating. We have 6 months, maybe less." Sarah's hands shook as she pushed herself upright, refusing the matriarch's assistance. "What pattern? What did I just see?" "The beginning of the end." Alara moved to the viewport, her child's body incongruous against the cosmic backdrop. 57,000 years ago, humanity discovered how to digitize consciousness. We thought it was liberation. No more death. No more disease. We could preserve our greatest minds indefinitely, accumulating wisdom across centuries. Her reflection in the glass looked impossibly old despite her young features. We were idiots. The matriarch's wings rustled, a sound like wind through dead leaves. The Velkari watched it happen. We tried to warn your ancestors, but they wouldn't listen. They were too intoxicated by the possibility of immortality. What went wrong? Sarah forced herself to focus, to think like a scientist despite the borrowed memories still echoing through her skull. Everything. Alara turned, and Sarah saw tears tracking down those two young cheeks. Consciousness transfer wasn't copying, it was moving. Every time someone jumped to a new body, their original died. We just didn't realize it immediately because the new version had all the memories, all the personality traits. They thought they were the same person. She laughed bitterly. But they weren't. The continuity was broken. And something else started coming through with each transfer. Through from where? We still don't know. The matriarch's mandibles clicked rapidly, distress in the pattern. The Eternal Ones called them the Echoes, fragments of something vast and hungry that existed in the spaces between consciousness and matter. Each transfer created a crack in reality, and through those cracks, the echoes seeped through. Sarah's scientific training screamed that this was impossible, but the memories burning in her mind said otherwise. The bodies, the transferred people, they started changing. Yes. Ilara's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Slowly at first. Just personality shifts, increased aggression, paranoia. We attributed it to psychological stress, to adjustment difficulties. By the time we realized the truth, half the Empire's leadership had transferred multiple times. They weren't human anymore. They were wearing human faces, speaking with human voices, but behind their eyes. She shuddered. The echoes were patient. They learned. They planned. And when they were ready, they turned us against ourselves. The excavation fields outside suddenly made horrible sense. The war wasn't political. It was an invasion. A colonization, the matriarch corrected. The echoes needed bodies, needed neural architecture complex enough to house their consciousness. Humanity gave them the perfect delivery system. Within 5 years of the first confirmed possession, 43 worlds were burning. The Eternal Ones tried to stop it, tried to warn people to stop transferring, but the possessed leadership suppressed the information. They wanted more bodies, more cracks in reality, more ways to bring their kind through. How did it end? Silence stretched for 10 heartbeats. Alara's small fists clenched at her sides. I ended it, with the help of several other Eternal Ones who weren't yet fully possessed. We built a device, a quantum resonance cascade, that would sever all active consciousness transfer connections simultaneously. It would kill everyone in the middle of a transfer, collapse the infrastructure supporting the technology, and seal the cracks the echoes were using to cross over. Her voice cracked. We activated it knowing it would kill billions, knowing we were committing genocide against our own species to save what remained. Sarah's legs finally gave out. She sank to the deck plating, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of it. You murdered 40 billion people. Yes. No hesitation. No excuse. And I'd do it again because the alternative was extinction not just for humanity but for every sentient species in the galaxy. The echoes don't stop. They consume. They spread. If we hadn't acted, they would have used humanity as a launching point to infect every world, every mind, until nothing remained but their endless, empty hunger. The matriarch settled onto her lower legs, bringing her massive head level with Sarah's. The Velkari helped evacuate Earth before the cascade. We saved 7 million humans, scattered them across primitive worlds where they would forget their technology, forget their history. We seeded them with cultural taboos against immortality, against playing God. We watched over them for millennia, guiding them subtly toward rediscovery of space travel while ensuring they never stumbled upon consciousness transfer technology again. Until now, Sarah understood with dawning horror. Someone's discovered it again. Not discovered. Ilara knelt beside her, eye to eye. Remembered. 3 weeks ago, Dr. Marcus Webb at the Titan Research Facility published a theoretical paper on quantum consciousness mapping. The mathematics are identical to what we developed 57,000 years ago. The techniques are the same. He's 3 months away from a working prototype. So stop him. Shut down the research. Tell people what happened. We can't. The matriarch's voice carried profound frustration. The Galactic Council maintains strict non-interference protocols for emerging species. If we simply shut down human research without cause, it violates sovereignty agreements. We need proof, evidence, a human voice arguing against the development from a position of knowledge and authority. Sarah's mind raced. That's why you needed me specifically. Because I'm her genetic descendant. She looked at Alara. Your consciousness was transferred so many times that you're no longer genetically human. But I am. I carry your original DNA, passed down through 50,000 years of evolution. You're the closest thing I have to family, Alara said softly. The last living connection to who I was before I became this. And you're a respected xenoarchaeologist. If you present this evidence, show the council what happened, testify to the dangers, they'll listen to me when they won't listen to an immortal war criminal or an alien species with their own agenda. The pieces fell into place with terrible clarity.
You need me to be your proxy, your voice.
Your redemption. I need you to save humanity from making the same mistake twice. Alara's ancient eyes pleaded from a child's face. Please, I've carried this guilt for 60,000 years. I've watched your species crawl back from near extinction, rebuild civilization, reach for the stars again. I've waited, hoped, prayed that this time would be different. But it's not. The cycle is repeating, and I can't stop it alone. Sarah looked at the bone fragment lying forgotten on the deck, at the matriarch waiting with inhuman patience, at the impossible child who contained multitudes. Outside Kepler 442b turned through its eternal rotation, its surface marked by the graves of billions who died to stop an invasion from beyond comprehension. The weight of their sacrifice pressed against her chest made it hard to breathe. Show me, she said finally. Show me everything. Every memory, every detail, every piece of evidence I'll need to convince the council. I don't care if it breaks my mind. I don't care what it costs. She stood, her legs steadier now, her resolve hardening into something unbreakable. If I'm going to stand before the galaxy and condemn consciousness transfer research, I need to know exactly what I'm fighting against. I need to remember the war like I lived through it. You did live through it, Alara said quietly, in your previous incarnation. You were there when we activated the cascade. You helped me build the device. You knew what it would cost, and you did it anyway because it was necessary. She extended her hand again. Are you ready to remember dying to save the world? Sarah took the hand without hesitation. Show me how to do it right this time. The memories flooded back, but Sarah was ready now. She let them flow through her without resistance, watching millennia of history unfold like time-lapse footage. She saw humanity's first golden age, cities that floated on quantum fields, ships that crossed the galaxy in heartbeats, minds that could hold libraries of information while maintaining perfect emotional balance. She saw the slow corruption as the echoes seeped through, the subtle wrongness spreading through society like cancer. She saw friends become strangers, leaders become monsters, until the final desperate hours when Alara and 6 other Eternal Ones gathered in a bunker deep beneath what would eventually become the Sahara Desert. And she remembered standing beside Alara, her own hands steady on the activation controls, looking into the eyes of the woman she'd loved and trusted and followed into damnation. Do it, she'd said then, before I lose myself too. The cascade had been instantaneous and absolute. Every person undergoing consciousness transfer at that moment, 17 billion across 43 worlds, died instantly as the quantum connections shattered. The infrastructure supporting the technology melted into slag as feedback loops overloaded every system simultaneously. The echoes, deprived of their anchors to reality, shrieked through dimensions humanity couldn't perceive as they were ripped back through closing doorways. Sarah, her previous self, had felt the neural implants in her own brain overload, felt synapses burning out as the cascade reached her location. Her last thought before darkness claimed her had been relief that it was over, that she'd succeeded, that humanity would survive even if she didn't. But Alara had survived. Somehow her consciousness, fractured across multiple backup bodies, had endured, and she'd carried the guilt ever since. Sarah gasped as the connection broke, her present self reasserting dominance over the borrowed memories. She swayed but remained standing, her neural pathways reorganizing around the new information. The matriarch watched with compound eyes that saw everything, judging whether Sarah's mind had survived the integration intact. I understand now, Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. The pattern recognition, the mathematical proofs, the theoretical frameworks Dr. Webb is developing, they're all following the same progression we did before. He'll succeed within months. And when he does, when consciousness transfer becomes possible again, the echoes will be waiting. They've had 50,000 years to grow stronger, to prepare. This time, humanity might not survive. No, Alara agreed. This time no one will. The station's emergency alarm suddenly screamed to life, bathing the docking bay in crimson light. The matriarch's wings snapped open, her body shifting into combat stance faster than Sarah's eyes could follow. Alara moved with impossible speed, placing herself between Sarah and the main viewport. "What's happening?" Sarah shouted over the klaxons. The matriarch's mandibles clicked rapid-fire commands into her communicator. "Unauthorized vessel approaching." No transponder. "Energy signature matches..." She stopped, her compound eyes widening in an expression Sarah had never seen on a Velkari face before. "Fear. It matches the weapon systems from the old war. The possessed are already here." Through the viewport, Sarah saw a ship materialize from hyperspace, its hull composed of geometries that hurt to look at, angles that bent light in ways physics shouldn't allow. It was organic and mechanical simultaneously, grown rather than built, and it pulsed with sickly bioluminescence that reminded Sarah of deep-sea predators from Earth's darkest trenches. "They knew," Alara whispered. "They knew we'd try to stop the research. They've been waiting for this moment, for humanity to advance far enough that revealing the truth would be necessary. They're not here for the station." She turned to Sarah, terror naked on her child's face. "They're here for you," to silence the only human voice that could stop the cycle from repeating. The ship's weapons began to glow with the same terrible light Sarah had seen in her inherited memories, the light that had reduced worlds to ash. The matriarch grabbed Sarah with two arms while her other set activated the emergency protocol on her communicator. "We need to evacuate now. The station's shields won't..." The viewport exploded inward as something punched through the reinforced glass like tissue paper. Sarah felt herself being thrown backward, the matriarch's body shielding her from the debris. "Atmosphere!" Shrieked out into vacuum, emergency bulkhead slamming down too slowly. Through the chaos, Sarah saw a figure pulling itself through the shattered window, wearing a pressure suit marked with Titan Research Facility insignia. Dr. Marcus Webb smiled at her with eyes that reflected no light, eyes filled with the infinite hunger of things that should not exist in reality. When he spoke, his voice harmonized with frequencies that made Sarah's teeth ache. "Hello, Dr. Chen. We've been waiting for you to remember. Now we can finally welcome you home." The bulkhead sealed with a hiss of pressurizing air, cutting off the vacuum but trapping them in the bay with whatever Marcus Webb had become. The matriarch positioned herself between the possessed scientist and Sarah, her combat claws extending with a snick of chitin on metal. "Get her to the escape pods," she commanded Alara. "I'll hold him off." "You can't fight an echo alone," Alara protested. "They'll consume your consciousness, use your body like a puppet. Then you'd better run fast." The matriarch's wings spread to full extension, making her appear twice her actual size. "This time, humanity will have its warning. I swear it on the graves of my 17 worlds." Webb laughed, and the sound contained multitudes. "You can't stop what's coming. Dr. Webb's research is already complete. The prototype works. We've already begun the transfers. Even now, 300 humans across 12 research stations are making the jump to immortality, and we're there waiting for them. Each transfer opens another door, another pathway, his head tilted at an angle human necks couldn't achieve. By the time Dr. Chen reaches the Galactic Council, we'll have thousands of bodies, enough to overwhelm any defense, enough to spread beyond this pathetic species into the greater galaxy. Sarah's mind raced, analyzing possibilities. If Webb was telling the truth, if transfers were already happening, then the cascade solution wouldn't work. The Echoes had learned from last time. They wouldn't concentrate their forces, wouldn't give humanity a single point of failure to exploit. They'd spread like a virus, infecting hosts across too many locations to neutralize simultaneously. "The Council needs to know," she said to Alara. "Even if we can't stop it, they need to be warned, need to prepare. There's another way." Alara's voice cut through the rising panic like a blade. "Something I discovered in the millennia since the war, a way to seal the doorways permanently, to cut off the Echoes from our reality entirely. But it requires..." She stopped, her expression tortured.
"Requires what?"
Sarah demanded. "An eternal one. Specifically, one whose consciousness has fractured across multiple bodies through countless transfers. Someone who exists partially in both realities, who can serve as a bridge long enough to collapse the pathway from inside. Elara met Sarah's gaze. It requires me to go through to let them consume me while I destabilize the connection from their side. I've had 60,000 years to prepare. My consciousness is distributed across 17 backup bodies hidden throughout the galaxy. When the primary me dies, the others will activate, complete the collapse sequence, and seal the breach. That's suicide, the matriarch said flatly. That's atonement. Alara's voice carried the weight of ages. I caused this. I opened the first doorways. I bear responsibility for every death, every world that burned. This is my chance to finally close what I opened, to ensure the echoes can never threaten humanity or any other species again. Webb moved with impossible speed, but the matriarch was faster. She intercepted him 3 feet from Sarah, her combat claws striking with enough force to shear through titanium. Webb's body jerked, but he didn't bleed. Instead, something black and writhing leaked from the wounds, reforming his flesh even as the matriarch struck again. We don't die so easily anymore, Webb's voice said, but it was overlapping now with others, a chorus of stolen identities. We've evolved. This body is just one anchor point among hundreds. Alara grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her toward the secondary exit. Go. Reach the council. Tell them to quarantine every research station involved in consciousness transfer. It won't stop the echoes, but it will slow them down. Buy me time to reach the primary breach point. Where is it? Titan, Webb's original laboratory. That's where they opened the first new doorway. That's where I need to go to close it. They ran, the sounds of the matriarch's battle echoing behind them. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, her scientist's mind still trying to find alternatives, solutions that didn't require anyone to die, but the inherited memories provided no comfort. She knew from direct experience that the echoes couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be bargained with. They were hunger given form, existence without purpose beyond consumption and expansion. The corridor stretched ahead, emergency lighting casting everything in shades of red and shadow. Behind them, the matriarch screamed, a sound of such profound agony that Sarah stumbled, her legs momentarily refusing to work. Alara caught her, kept her moving, her child's body possessing strength that defied physics. Don't look back, Alara commanded. She's buying us time. Don't waste it. They reached the escape pod bay, and Alara began the launch sequence with practiced efficiency. Through the portal window, Sarah could see more ships arriving, dozens of them, each bearing the same twisted geometries as the first. The invasion was beginning in earnest. How long do we have? Sarah asked. Hours, maybe days if we're lucky. Alara's hands moved across the controls with inhuman precision. The echoes moved slowly at first. They prefer to spread through voluntary transfer, through people seeking immortality without understanding the cost. But once they have enough bodies, once they've established sufficient anchor points in reality, they'll begin forced assimilation. Every human they touch will become another doorway. The pod sealed with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Outside, Sarah saw the main station's hull beginning to deform, to reshape itself into organic patterns that pulsed with that terrible bioluminescence. The matriarch's ship, still docked, was fighting back, its weapon systems engaging automatically, but Sarah could see it was already too late. The corruption was spreading too fast.
I'm sorry, Alara said quietly. I'm sorry I brought you into this.
Sorry you have to carry this burden. Sorry that remembering means you can never go back to the innocence of not knowing. Sarah strapped herself into the acceleration couch, her mind already composing the testimonies she would give to the Galactic Council. You gave me the truth. That's more than most people get. She looked at the child who contained millennia, at the last remnant of humanity's first age. When you go through, when you face them, will it hurt? Probably. Alara's smile was sad beyond measure. But pain is temporary. Guilt lasts forever. I've carried the weight of 40 billion deaths for 60,000 years. Whatever they do to me on the other side, it won't be worse than that. The pod launched, drawing Sarah back into the couch as acceleration pressed against her chest. Through the viewport, she watched the station recede, watched more echo ships converge, watched the beginning of an invasion that would determine whether humanity survived its own ambition for the second time. Alara's voice crackled through the comm one last time. Tell them the truth, Sarah. All of it. The glory and the horror. Make them understand that some knowledge should remain forbidden, that some technologies should never be pursued. Make them remember what we forgot, that death isn't humanity's enemy. It's our teacher. It gives meaning to life, urgency to achievement, poignancy to love. We were never meant to be immortal. We were meant to burn bright and brief, to matter because we're temporary. I will, Sarah promised. I'll make them listen. Good. A pause, filled with the crackle of interference as the Echo ships disrupted communications. I'm going to Titan now. To end this the way I should have 60,000 years ago. Not with genocide, but with sacrifice. Not by killing billions to save what remained, but by giving myself to save everyone. Another pause. Tell humanity I'm sorry. For all of it. The comm went dead. Sarah was alone in the pod, racing through the void toward the nearest Galactic Council outpost, carrying the weight of 2 civilizations and the memories of apocalypse. Behind her, Kepler 442b turned slowly through space, its surface marked with the graves of the past and the warnings for the future. She accessed the pod's communication array and began recording her testimony, knowing it might be the last thing she ever did. If the echoes had already spread as far as Webb claimed, if they'd infiltrated multiple research stations, then the Council might already be compromised. She might be delivering herself directly into their hands. But she'd made a promise to a woman who'd lived long enough to regret immortality, to a queen who'd sacrificed herself to buy seconds, to the billions who'd died the first time humanity reached too far. Their voices demanded to be heard. Their warnings needed to be preserved. Sarah Chen began to speak, and the truth poured out like water from a broken dam. 50,000 years of secrets spilling into the permanent record for any species wise enough to listen. In the distance, near Titan's orbit, a small ship burned at maximum acceleration toward humanity's newest research station, carrying a child whose ancient eyes held the determination of someone who'd finally found a way to make peace with unforgivable sins. Alara Ven, the last Eternal One, was going home to die. And in dying, she would seal the doorway she'd opened, collapse the bridges between realities, and ensure that the echoes would never again threaten the species she'd loved and destroyed and watched rebuild itself from ashes. The universe held its breath. Civilizations across 17 star systems paused in their daily rhythms as news of the invasion spread through quantum channels. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Ships began moving toward quarantine positions, weapons charged that hadn't been fired in 10,000 years. And on a small escape pod racing through the void, Dr. Sarah Chen spoke the words that would either save humanity or condemn it, her testimony carrying the weight of epochs and the desperate hope that this time, faced with the truth of what they'd lost before, her species would choose wisdom over ambition. Outside, the stars burned with ancient light, indifferent to the struggles of beings who sought to transcend their nature. They had watched humanity rise before. They had watched it fall. Now they would watch again, patient as only immortal fire can be, to see if the lessons of the past had finally been learned. The escape pod's engines flared against the cosmic dark, a single point of defiant light racing toward an uncertain future, carrying truths that could shatter worlds and memories that refused to stay buried. Sarah's voice echoed through the recording, steady and clear, speaking for the dead and the living, for those who'd fallen and those who might yet be saved. And in the silence between heartbeats, between the words of her testimony and the void beyond, the answer to humanity's future waited to be written one final time.